I got a second TV here in the studio, but the engineers put Woke 41 on it. I don't know what that's all about, but I'll take it. I'll switch the channel at some point. Hope you had a great weekend. It is always good to be here with you, kicking off a new week on KCMO. And we are down the home stretch in what has been one of the great local stories I've had the chance to cover in my soon-to-start year 7 here on KCMO 95.7 FM. And that is the drama over these next 8 days as we head towards April 2nd. And you, the Jackson County voter, getting set to decide whether or not you want to continue with a 3/8 cent sales tax with the Kansas City Royals and the Kansas City Chiefs to keep them in Jackson County. So I spent the weekend, of course, watching March Madness, of course, cleaning dirty baby diapers, and then also watching the debates that happened last week at the Kansas City Public Library, which aired on Friday and on Sunday on Kansas City PBS. Our buddy Nick Haynes was the MC of that event, and they had folks on from the Vote Yes side and the Vote No side. The Vote Yes side included Sly James, former Kansas City mayor, who is working with the teams, and Sarah Torville, who is an executive vice president for the Royals. Meantime, on the no side was Becky Nace, who is a former Kansas City councilwoman, who is also on the committee to vote no on this tax, and our good buddy Patrick Toohey from the Show Me Institute. They're a Missouri-based think tank. Patrick joins us not every Wednesday, but he is a regular Wednesday guest here on KCMO. And it was a great debate. Now, there were a bunch of KC Tenants clowns in their yellow shirts, probably hadn't washed them in 2 weeks, and they're in the front row with their masks on and the whole thing. It's like, okay, it's 2024. Can you take the face diapers off? They just looked beyond ridiculous, wearing a face diaper as like a young, relatively healthy person in 2024.
Well, it's like Antifa. They've got day jobs at Starbucks. They don't want to be recognized.
Yeah, maybe
right?
That's it.
Yeah.
But here's the funny part, or ironic part. This is like the least controversial thing that they've lobbied against. Of all the things and on the dumb ideas they've had, this is like their least dumb idea. They actually have a lot of conservatives who agree with them on this.
Yeah, but like when you're a mascot, you never step out of character, right?
Yeah.
So
I think you're right.
Like that.
I think that's exactly what it is. So it was an hour-long special, and it was very well done by Nick Haynes. Listen, Nick obviously has been in this town for decades now, but Nick Haynes could moderate Meet the Press. I'm not blowing smoke. He's that good. He doesn't make it about himself. His questions are pointed. Heck, I think he's better than, bowl cut Chuck Todd ever was on Meet the Press and Kristen Welker and some of these people. He doesn't make it about himself. It's not about his ego. It's about the people on stage. So he kept this debate moving, just like he does every week with his talk show. But of course, yesterday as I'm watching this thing, I had to hear the concrete cancer had to come up. It just had to come up. So someone in the audience asked about the concrete cancer. Remember, Mark Donovan said a couple of weeks ago, the president of the Chiefs, he said that, Arrowhead got a good batch of concrete and Kauffman Stadium got a bad batch of concrete. Somebody asked Sarah Torville, the executive vice president of the Royals, about the concrete cancer that we've been hearing so much about, and here's what she said.
Did the K receive a bad batch of concrete that Arrowhead did not?
Okay.
I'll actually comment on that first.
Yes. Sarah, thank you.
Thank you. I personally wouldn't have chosen to use the word batch, but I will tell you that it should come as no surprise to the county and the county executive that there has been a report since 2007 that has shown significant deterioration in concrete cancer. As a matter of fact, in 2006, they tested 59 samples. Of the 59 samples, 56 of them had concrete cancer. So the taxpayers' dollars, what you're paying for today, is actually to repair concrete. As we look to make an investment in the future, why would we continue to want to ask taxpayers to support a building that is deteriorating? But I also just want to be remiss. We're not saying that we're solely leaving because of concrete cancer. There are a number of things we're leaving. We're leaving because we have to have a vision and a plan for the future. We have to assure that our team has the amenities that it needs to perform at the highest level, and that we continue to compete and assure that our fans have the amenities they deserve.
I will give Sarah Torville this. I am glad she said at the end that this is not about concrete cancer. I'm very, very glad that she made that point, because that is a point I've been asking the Royals to make for a very long time. You know, regardless of how you feel about downtown baseball and what's gone on here with the stadium and the drama and everything else, it's not Sarah Torville's fault. She's the EVP. It's not her fault that this thing has missed deadlines, has been bungled from a PR perspective. It's not her fault. But it is the fault of somebody, and ultimately the buck has to stop at the top. It is the fault of somebody that we've had to hear about things like concrete cancer, because it just sounds ridiculous, especially when you have a Burns and McDonald study from 2022 that showed Kauffman Stadium in satisfactory condition. And we've talked about that here on this show. So I'm glad she said, hey, it's a thing. Here's what our study has said since 2007. That being said, this is not the reason we're leaving. That's what people want to and need to hear. Not the engineering nerd from Populous, which is the big firm in town that, has developed and would be not building the stadium, but would be doing all the fancy drawings and doing the engineering work for the stadium. Not hearing from him on how the K is going to, fall apart piece by piece, and you're going to get hit on the head with concrete this summer if you go out to Kauffman Stadium if you don't give us a new stadium. Nobody wants to hear that. That's not a compelling argument. So she handled that well. But it just reminded me of one of the many missteps and missed opportunities that the Royals and the Chiefs have made in the last few weeks and, frankly, few months on this very project. It did come out on Saturday as well, the Royals announcing commitments it will make to the Crossroads Community Association if the yes vote does pass coming up next Tuesday. The Royals are pledging their support to small businesses, including those displaced by the potential stadium, assisting with rent support, relocation assistance, tenant improvements, and payroll coverage to help with employee retention. The team will also discuss construction scheduling with property owners and businesses in the area to reduce its impact, and will improve infrastructure impacted by the stadium with an emphasis on stormwater management, green solutions, and development. Are the green solutions enough for the Wokadokes and the Crossroads to suddenly change their tune and be open to the ballpark in their backyard? I'm just picturing the Royals sitting around the executive table. What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? I got it. Green solutions. All right, we got a bunch of greenies on our hands. Just offer them some green solutions and we'll be just fine. And you know what? It might work. I don't know if it will, but I'll tell you what. I've heard less from the Crossroads folks over the last 48 hours. But we'll see. We'll be watching. We'll be following. And it is going to be a race to the finish. A lot of audio we'll be playing from the weekend and what took place at the Kansas City Public Library. And I'll also link to it on the KCMO Twitter and Facebook pages. That way, if you haven't watched it, you should. It is actually an hour well spent, especially if you're a Jackson County voter and you're going to be going to the polls coming up on April 2nd. 913-408-7957. It's great to be back on a Monday morning on KCMO. What do we know about this awful terrorist attack in Moscow? We'll get you the latest and the details next on KCMO. Got to listen to Sanjay Gupta at 6:15 on a Monday talking about fecal matter on my shoes getting brought into my house. I mean, my goodness. Really? That's what I needed on a Monday? Sanjay Gupta talking about poop on my shoes, John? Jeez.
Going to have to rename the mud porch now.
Yeah. Oh, man, that is the dumbest thing on this radio station. But,
now, I was in here commenting to Mark. I'm like, that's why the Japanese take off their shoes when they go in the house.
Yeah, I wonder what kind of conversations you guys have on the other side of the glass, and now I know. Now I know.
Mark's eyes glaze over.
I said they should go to your friends at Zero Res.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's
right. That's right. Kept my buddy Steve in the line at Zero Res. Oh, man. So over the weekend, of course, if you maybe just kind of did what Mark probably did and buried yourself in March Madness and bet every game, 48 games. Did you bet every single game, Mark? Just be honest. It's okay.
Not every game.
Okay. We're all
a
friends
few
here.
parlays.
A few parlays?
Won a few, lost a few.
Okay. All right.
Up for the weekend.
Up for the weekend. That's all I need to know about. That's all I care about. I don't want you selling your body outside the station later today, okay? So you're up for the weekend. That's good. So there was this terrible tragedy and terrorist attack in Moscow. 130 people ended up getting killed. And what we know right now is that 4 men who have been accused of staging the Russian concert hall attack that killed over 130 people appeared before a Moscow court on Sunday on charges of terrorism. And these guys were really banged up. One of them appeared to be barely conscious during the hearing. What we know right now is that a court statement said 2 of the suspects accepted their guilt in the assault, though the men's condition raised questions about whether they were speaking freely. And, of course, here's the weird part of this whole thing. You've got Russian media outlets that are obviously telling a different story when you have state-run media compared to what U.S. media is saying right now. So you've got these 4 guys who are charged. I'm not going to even try to pronounce their names. I'll be here till 9 o'clock this morning. And they are accused and charged with committing a terrorist attack resulting in the death of others. The offense carries a maximum sentence of life imprisonment. Moscow's district court ordered that the men, all of whom were identified in the media as citizens, be held in custody until May 22nd, pending an investigation and a trial. They're citizens of Tajikistan. So these guys are, according to reports that we have here in the U.S., members of ISIS-K. That's an offshoot of ISIS, which has come back into creation courtesy of Grandpa's withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021, which we talked about obviously extensively at the time. We haven't talked about in a while, but it really has led to the chaos that we have seen across the entire Middle East. Historians, I believe, are going to look back on Joe Biden's butchered withdrawal in 2021, and there will be ramifications that we're living through right now, that we've lived through over the last 3 years, and that we'll continue to live through in the wake of how porous of a job that was by this administration almost 3 years ago now. But what you have is you have a revival of ISIS, and specifically in Afghanistan, which they have used as basically a sanctuary since Joe's withdrawal 2.5 years ago. And now you've got ISIS-K competing with the Taliban and al-Qaeda for what I would basically call jihadist supremacy in that region. And I hate to say let's pick the tallest midget here, but in a perfect world, what you would have happen is the Taliban eliminating ISIS in Afghanistan. Not that you want to pick one over the other, but, you know, it is trying to figure out, okay, which one of these groups is most likely to not try to just kill innocent people across the world, or at least as few as possible. And the belief is that the Taliban is best suited for that. But they apparently do not have the wherewithal to get rid of ISIS-K. So there's 2 factions to this. There's the Russia faction and what happens in the short term. And according to several reports, what you have right now is Putin already pointing the finger at Ukraine. There's no evidence right now to suggest this was Ukraine, but that's where Putin's pointing the finger for 2 reasons. One, he does not want to look like a guy who ignored United States intelligence, which has also been reported that the U.S. basically tipped off Russia that this was possible. He does not want to look like somebody who ignored warnings about this. He does not want to give the United States an ounce of credit. That does not benefit him right now. So he's not going to say, boy, yeah, we saw this coming and we totally screwed it up. And we didn't trust the Americans and now we got 130 people dead. He's not going to do that. And then part 2 is, well, obviously it's beneficial to him if he points the finger at Kiev, at Zelensky, and at Ukraine as he continues his assault going on now over 2 years on trying to annex part of the country. So when it comes to the Russian propaganda here, that's important to note, and what motivates them and what would be in the best interest of Vladimir Putin. And that's what's in the best interest of Vladimir Putin. And you think about how he's used things like this in the past. And the Wall Street Journal actually wrote about this yesterday, how he has used these types of events to his own political advantage. Like an apartment bombing back in 1999, he alleged that was an inside job, and that helped elevate him to the presidency. So now Putin is going to be bombing the you-know-what out of Ukraine with missile attacks as part of this misdirection effort on his part. So that's the short term, what's going on in that part of the world. And then there's the angle here in the United States. As now the Middle East becomes more dangerous, I mean, we know what's going on between Israel and Hamas. Now you have the Taliban, ISIS-K, and all these factions of Islamic Jihad that are battling for power in places like Afghanistan. Well, if you don't think that target number one is always going to be American citizens, then you have not been paying attention. You haven't been alive long enough, or you've just been burying your head in the sand. They're coming for the United States. That's not me fear-mongering on a Monday. That's just a fact. They are coming for the United States. How, when, where, I don't know. You hope the U.S. intelligence can nip it in the bud, but, we've seen it obviously not work out before. Their end game is always going to be innocent American civilians, whether overseas or here at home. And we can look back to 2021, but we can also look to what is going on today in this country on our borders. And if this weekend and what happened in Moscow is not a wake-up call still for a lot of us, then I really don't know what else to say. I mean, you saw the videos from late last week where you had, 100 people basically trying to knock down a fence and knock over Border Patrol to get across the southern border. It's amazing none of those guys pulled the trigger. It is not just, people coming to claim asylum. It is an invasion by every definition of the word. And what happened in Moscow is another reminder that we have got to be vigilant and we have got to be paying attention. And the people in charge right now are not looking out for our safety and are not looking out for our best interests. Welcome back. Kicking off the new week here on KCMO Talk Radio. 8 days to go until one of the biggest votes, most intriguing votes, most unpredictable votes that we have had in years here in Kansas City. And over the weekend, watched a lot of the tournaments, cleaned and changed a lot of diapers, and also spent an hour yesterday watching the Townhall from the public library last week, where two individuals from the yes side on the Jackson County Chiefs Royals tax, Sarah Torville, who's an EVP for the Royals, and Sly James, former mayor in Kansas City, debated the no side. Patrick Toohey with the Show Me Institute, and Becky Nace, former Kansas City councilwoman, who is part of this committee to vote no against Royals' new taxes. And it was very well done. Nick Haynes did an outstanding job moderating this event. And as I was watching it, there were multiple parts of this that stood out to me. But one in particular stood out in this back and forth between Patrick Toohey, who is against the tax, and Sarah Tourville, who is an executive vice president for the Royals. And they were talking about economic impact of these teams when it came to whether or not you should vote on the 3/8 cent sales tax coming up next Tuesday. Here's what that sounded like.
Property tax, sales tax, income tax, everybody who wants to build a hotel or stadium is not the way we grow.
Sarah Tourville with the Royals.
I won't comment on property tax because I know that's a very sensitive topic for all of us, our property taxes. But I think Patrick is leading many people here to think that there's no economic benefit from these two teams, when in fact the Chiefs alone generated $993 million of impact. But what did Jackson County get from that? $572 million of impact. So I'm struggling to understand that you say that the taxpayers are not benefiting, but indeed they are, because the money that's going right back into their community, into their stores, into their restaurants.
So it's not just a matter of what the teams generate. It's you subtract that from what taxpayers are paying to get it. It is a net loss for taxpayers. And it's not just these stadiums. It's stadiums around the country.
Okay. Ask you, what stadiums around the country?
Thank you. Sarah.
I just want to understand, can you talk more specifically about which projects have not delivered, have delivered a net loss?
In Kansas City?
No. You talked about around the country. Which sports projects?
No, the economic... Excuse me, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you.
The economic literature is very clear. The subsidies don't pay off for the taxpayers. Yes, the teams generate money, but it is less than what the taxpayers have put into it. That's how you look at economic impact. You just don't look at the spending. You're like, what did taxpayers give to get that income?
That's Patrick Tuohy, Show Me Institute, a regular guest on this show, and Sarah Torville, Executive Vice President with the Royals, debating this at the Kansas City Public Library. That aired on KCPBS over the weekend. Now, you can make numbers basically say whatever you want. On either side of this, by the way. That's not me picking a side. You can make numbers say whatever you want on either side of this debate. That's a fact. But I've always thought that when it comes to stadiums, and I say this as a sports fan who goes to multiple games, who loves sports. So I'm not one of these, I don't go to the games anyway, I don't care if they leave. No, I don't want that. I don't want that at all. But I always think that when you talk about, hey, the team being here generated $500 million in economic impact for restaurants and stores and things like that. How do you really quantify that? How do you do it? How can you say that somebody spent $100 at said restaurant only because the teams were in their current locations? Now, if we're talking about restaurants right outside the stadium, that may be one thing. But you and I both know there are no restaurants outside of the stadium because the Denny's burned down, and that was the last one, right? I don't think there's anything else over there I can think of.
Taco Bell.
Oh, that's right. Mark's favorite spot, the late-night Taco Bell run he does outside the stadiums. Can't think of anything else, though. So, and I'm pretty confident, by the way, that Taco Bell ain't generating $500 million in economic impact. I love Taco Bell. Well, kind of, depending on how drunk I am. I'm okay with Taco Bell. But, it doesn't, if that's a Taco Bell generating $500 million in economic impact, that's the most successful Taco Bell in the history of mankind. If a Taco Bell generates $500,000, that's a good Taco Bell. So I'm not buying that. But I understand the relationship is as such, where you sit there and you say, okay, this is done all over the country. These relationships exist, public-private partnerships on stadiums. What makes the most sense for these teams in this scenario ahead of next Tuesday? I don't believe that anybody is all that bothered by giving the Chiefs 3/16 of a cent sales tax, half of 3/8, to upgrade Arrowhead. I think most people would say they feel the team deserves it. And I think if these issues were separate ballot issues, the Chiefs would pass 80-20. It's the Royals' angle that makes this more controversial, that makes this much more of a coin flip vote ahead of next Tuesday. One, because people feel like they're getting hosed a little bit. Two, the team hasn't been good. They don't want to go downtown, and they don't like the Crossroads idea. All of that wrapped in the one is what has people hot and bothered. And has this thing what I think is going to be a 50-50 vote. I mean, if it's 51-49 next Tuesday, I'm not going to be surprised at all. 913-408-7957. Mark is in Independence. What's up, Mark? Happy Monday.
Hey, happy Monday, and thank you for helping to add clarity to the situation. I just wanted to say on issues like this, you hear big, grandiose terms about the aggregate, the economic impact, et cetera, either way. But from my standpoint, I drive a big rig, and we are regulated on our time. What concerns me, not just the parking, but hell, the traffic to the games, the traffic from the games. You're going to have I-35 tied up. You're going to have 70, 670, 71 highway. And what my concern is, and I know it's going to happen, is on a daily operational viewpoint and a regulatory impact. First of all, truckers were timed. We can't be sitting in traffic forever. That's going to affect the efficiency of delivering goods and services to downtown businesses, even businesses that aren't a bar or a restaurant. So
let me ask you this, though, Mark, and I don't mean to say this. I don't mean to say this negatively, but are you just going to have to basically change around your delivery times? I mean, if there's a game at 7 o'clock first pitch, you just know you got to be out of downtown by, let's say, 5 o'clock on game day.
It's not that easy to do.
Okay.
Because you have a lot of different customers with a lot of different needs. They also have delivery times where they will accept deliveries, partially tied to their employees, their personnel. And DOT makes no exceptions for you. Mm-hmm. So I you're right. What muddies the water is the Royals. Now, what also aggravates me is even with the Chiefs. I'm a big Chiefs fan. I'm a Royals fan. But if you threaten me with we're going to leave and we don't get our way, that pisses me off. To me, that's disrespectful. And then I'm ready to give you the finger and say, you know what, I don't want to see you go. But if you're going to mistreat me that way, screw you.
Mark, thank you. Listen, you are weaving right into one of my points here that I want to make, and I'll do it right after Bill O'Reilly's morning update here on KCMO. It has gotten nasty. There's no doubt about it. I don't think the Royals and the Chiefs wanted it to get this nasty. It has. I think they've been caught off guard by the blowback and the pushback. And that is something that has been one of the plethora, regardless of if you are okay with what the teams want to do in extending the sales tax. It has been one of the plethora of mistakes they have made, and that is kind of toying with this idea of, well, we just might have to pick up and go if this thing fails. And that was noted in this debate over the weekend. I'll play for you what they specifically said when it came to threats of leaving next on KCMO 95.7 FM. Stream us on a Monday on the iHeart app. Well, Bill O'Reilly was on the show this past Friday, by the way. If you missed that, it's up on the podcast, wherever you get your podcast. One of Bill's, well, he's always a great appearance, but one of his best appearances on this show from Friday. So if you missed that, just check it out, subscribe, and download the podcast. Brought up by a caller just before the break, that one of the things he's ticked off about with the Chiefs and the Royals is how they basically have gone to the point of threatening to leave if they do not get their yes vote next Tuesday. Now, I'm going to give the teams the benefit of the doubt. I don't believe they wanted to use that threat. We know teams use it all the time. I don't think they wanted to go there. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. But this thing has gotten nastier and, frankly, has gotten closer, with it being a coin flip, than they anticipated it being just a few months ago. So they're breaking out all the stops. That's how it goes in business. That's how negotiations go, like it or not. And it came up again at the Kansas City Public Library, where Royals Executive Vice President Sarah Torville was asked that very question by Nick Haynes. Here's what it sounded like.
What the team's plan might be if the sales tax fails, he responded this way. I think they would have to include leaving Kansas City. Is that an option the Royals are considering, Sarah?
I would echo the sentiment. I mean, our hope, we've been partners for 50 years. Becky's right. Our hope is that we stay partners with Jackson County for another 50 years. I will tell you, Patrick, if the vote does not pass, we will consider all of our options.
All right, that's been the line. We'll consider all of our options. How do you read into that at 913-408-7957? If I'm someone who's been a fan for 50 years, I grew up with this team, I'd be annoyed by that. Because it's kind of like the abusive spouse mentality where, hey, you do what I say or I'm going to leave you. It's kind of like a mental mind bleep. You know how those go all the time, right? Where it's like, oh, you better do it. If not, oh, you're going to regret it. I'm out of here. You see it happen in relationships all the time. And it's not one of those things that I think the fan base here deserves, regardless of how next Tuesday goes. John?
I am with you. I understand what you're saying, but I will point out language is always said leaving Jackson County. We did entertain Clay County for the Royals. Perhaps that would be back on. So this leaving, yeah, we didn't really want to go there. The teams, I'm sure, didn't think they'd have to go there. But in this sense, we might think of potentially the Chiefs going to Kansas, yes. Royals to Clay County, potentially.
Yes, I think that's definitely step one when they talk about leaving. I don't think it's leaving for Nashville or Salt Lake City or anything like that. It is more about leaving for Clay County. But here's the thing. The whole Clay County deal, like what ultimately came out of that is the math didn't work. The Royals wanted more sales tax dollars than Clay County wanted to give them. So they crunched the numbers and they realized we're better off taking our half of a 3/8 cent in Jackson than we are going up to Clay. I think it was really that simple. I think the Clay County option was a good one, and they would have done it if the math made sense. The math didn't make sense. So then you're looking at the state of Kansas. I mean, Kansas, if they're just going to keep giving away the farm to everyone who wants to invest there, like they're the redheaded stepchild, I guess, but that would be bad economics for Kansas as well if they want to do that. 913-408-7957. Paul, you're on KCMO. Go.
Yeah, Pete, real quick. Yeah, this issue has formed kind of an odd coalition. Reagan conservatives like myself, the KC tenant, and progressives from Brookside north to the Crossroads have formed a coalition.
Yeah.
Isn't that odd?
It is. It is bizarre. You've got conservatives across eastern Jackson County combining with urban communists in KC tenants who are wearing their face diapers at the Kansas City Public Library at this event last week. I mean, it's 2024, and these clowns are in the first two rows in their face masks. Like it's April of 2020. I can't help. I just can't take you seriously when you're doing that. But at the same time, they, as Paul noted, they got a point. Dennis in Bonner Springs. Dennis, go ahead, my man.
Hey, good morning. Hey, I believe it was the mayor that said it, or maybe it was the lady, and God bless her. Every time she tried to talk, she got talked over by the crowd. But the mayor's point was, do you think we'd really want to do this if we wanted to move the team? Why would we go through all this? Why would we be doing this if we wanted to move the team?
Oh, you're talking about Sly James when he was making that point.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't consider the clown that. But anyway, I won't go there. And the other thing is, I find it so ironic. KC Tenant is sitting there screaming and hollering about tax dollars when they get tax dollars, and what is our benefit from them?
Well, there is zero benefit to that clown
there you
show.
Go, brother.
Zero.
Thank you.
Thank you very much there, Dennis. Yeah, there is zero. I made a lot of points on this the last bunch of weeks. That's one I haven't made. KC Tenants does get some taxpayer monies, and they are a completely worthless organization, even if they actually have some salient points on this specific issue with the Royals and Chiefs and the vote no side. And I say that painfully because I really can't stand them. I can't. I mean, they were abusing Nick Haynes. They were abusing the panelists at this event last week that aired on PBS over the weekend. It was great. We're going to post it on the KCMO Talk Radio Facebook and Twitter pages. That way you can watch it for yourself and continue to hear from you with 8 days to go. The good, the bad, and the ugly is at 7:45, and more of your calls with just a week left here on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. The other miscalculation here that the Royals and the Chiefs have made, and they've made many, even if you're sympathetic as I am to a yes vote, they have made many mistakes that is indisputable, is the populist movement and engagement, where people do not want to be told in today's political and economic climate what is in their best interests by the elites. They don't want to told. They do not want to be told that right now. Based on what the country has been through the last few years, economically speaking, they don't want to hear it. And a lot of what you're hearing and what you've heard over the last bunch of weeks is basically people around the teams saying, do this, vote this way, it's in your best interest, trust us, we know what's best for you. And if you don't, well, we may pack up and go. Now, as John rightfully pointed out, I don't think they're leaving the Kansas City region. They may take another look at Clay County. They may look to the Kansas side. All that's absolutely true. But I don't think they're leaving the region if this goes down next week. But this dates back to COVID, where we were told, hey, put on the damn mask. Put on the little face diaper. If not, you got to kill somebody. Hey, take that shot. You'll stop the spread. Right? You've been told all these things, what's in your best interests for really on steroids 4 years now. And this is not just for one side of the political aisle. This is for both sides in different ways. People are sick of it. People are fed up by it. They aren't in that mindset right now of listening to the richest and most powerful people tell them what is in their best interest, even if they're sympathetic and even if they take a step back and they say to themselves, 3/8 of a cent. Maybe if you're a Jackson County resident, estimates are $100 a year. I love these teams. I get great joy out of these teams. They've been good partners. They've been good stewards. And it makes sense at a pretty cheap rate to keep them here. That's where the head talks. But the heart has been saying something else for a lot of people. And we're seeing that play out in our political arena as well over the last bunch of years. You're seeing it from Republicans, from more populist elements of the Republican Party, the Josh Hawleys, the J.D. Vances of the world. You're seeing it from the Bernie Sanders and the Elizabeth Warrens on the left side of the political aisle, the AOCs. The go after the elites, go after the establishment, go after, the perceived folks who run the country and run the world. And you're getting a microcosm effect of this in Kansas City. And the teams are too much in their bubbles to realize what's happening on the ground. And they have not given that enough credit, which is why they should not have made this. And they should not have even gone down the road of, well, if this goes down, we're going to explore all our options. Like, don't even go there. If you get asked that by media folks, here's what I would say, or here's what I would have said in hindsight. I would have just said something like, we're not even considering that. We think this is a great opportunity for all parties involved, and we're simply going to advocate for the yes. We're not even thinking. It's like the old coaches speak. I'm not thinking about the next game.
Right. We're thinking about, we're not thinking beyond April 2nd.
Yeah, exactly. That's all they had to say. Instead of now these, veiled threats of, we're going to have to look at all the options. Don't even go there. It's not worth your time. And all you've done is piss people off who otherwise would be sympathetic to you, who just don't want to be told by the elite of the elite who you've given tax dollars to for decades now, well, you guys might not be good enough. It just might not be in our best interest to keep doing business with you. Glenn's north of Kansas City. Hello, Glenn. Good morning. You're on KCMO. What's up?
Good morning, Pete. Congratulations. Haven't had a chance to talk to you since the birth of your third daughter. So my first question is, are you going to get a paper route or deliver pizzas to pay for the 3 weddings and the 3 colleges?
We're just going to keep building this show. The ratings are skyrocketing. So
right.
We're going to keep bringing in great endorsers and great advertisers and keep making more money the old-fashioned way through the day job, Glenn. That's the hope, at least. So you got to tell all your buddies to keep listening to KCMO 95.7 FM.
I will do that. You have grown this market. You didn't ask, but I'll tell you, the 95.7, I live 60 miles north of downtown Kansas City. It is awesome. The signal is just really solid and clear.
Thank you, brother.
I called to talk about, there's another dimension. I agree that they had poor communication and they missed the mark. But I think as a business decision, I think, number one, Glass sucked all the money out of the Royals, and then Sherman got it. And it's like, okay, if they had put more money in instead of, right before all this came to a head, we're going to sign this player to a, $240 million deal. If they were more transparent, if they said, hey, this is what we want to do, we'll work with you. I think Hunt probably did the right thing by just being transparent and coming out and talking. But I think the Royals, they delayed their decision. It wasn't transparent. There were times that they were coy and sly, and it came across as dishonest. And I think that if this was split, the Chiefs would easily get the money and the Royals wouldn't.
Yeah.
But I also think, too, that the Royals, this is my attitude, my mom actually knew Ewing Kauffman years ago, that the Royals aren't that special. I think you and the other people in Kansas City reported they almost had their worst year this last year, and they escaped by the skin of their teeth. If they had come close to taking, like, the division, then there'd probably be a little bit more sympathy. But it's like they also reap what they sow. If they're not going to be transparent, if they're going to be coy, appear, I'm not saying they're dishonest, Pete, but if they appear to be dishonest and they're playing all these games and there's poor communication, people are going to say not only no, but hell no.
Well,
I think
they've broken lot I want to digest there, Glenn. Thank you, my man. A lot.
Thank you, Pete.
A lot of their own deadlines they've missed. That's step and issue number one. Now, there are reasons they've missed those deadlines, but they missed their own deadlines. So right away, this thing was approved on the ballot by the Jackson County legislature before we knew what the Chiefs even wanted to do with the money and before the Royals even announced where they wanted to be. So the timelines were all out of whack, which that alone has been problematic in terms of how this has played out. Now, as for the quality of the team, listen, the Royals did just spend almost $300 million on their star player. You give them credit for that. John Sherman did buy this team at not the best time. He bought it in November of 19. Maybe it was October, November, somewhere in there, after the 2019 season, right before COVID. He got his clock cleaned in 20. I'm not saying you got to, shed any tears. I'm just pointing out the obvious here, which is the timing was rough for this ownership group. It's indisputable. But I do think that John Sherman, and I say this as someone who's only talked to him a couple of times. I'm hoping to have him on the show this week. We're going to be out at the K on Thursday, by the way, for opening day. So, unlike the fanboys on sports radio who don't know their elbows from their rear ends, we're going to actually hopefully talk to these people and get some real answers to their questions and not just fangirl out. So I'm looking forward to that on Thursday. But I do think also from knowing people close to him that he does have the best interests of Kansas City at heart. Doesn't mean necessarily that you should think this is a good deal, but I do think that the intentions are in the right place. Unlike, let's say, Seattle Supersonics, if you're a basketball fan. That team was bought, 20 years ago now, almost, by a bunch of guys from Oklahoma who everyone knew wanted to move that team to Oklahoma City, and that's ultimately what they did. I don't think John Sherman has any plans or intended to buy this team to then bring it somewhere else. I don't believe that. It doesn't mean that you should vote yes. I'm just simply pointing out that that's what I believe to be true. But they missed their own deadlines. Yes, the quality of the team has not been good. That's hurt them, and that hurts any team in this vote. The timing has not been great. And that's what's going to make this thing coming up next week razor thin. It will be a coin flip between the yes and the no. Former Mayor Sly James, he'll be the first to tell you he can be a little surly sometimes. I've experienced that firsthand on this show. When I got to town, we're starting year 7 here pretty soon. But I had Sly James on the show towards the end of his tenure in 2019. And I asked him about, the crime rate, which actually was low compared to these days. But he spun it back on me, and it's a pretty good audio clip. I got to dig up at some point. But anyway, he can be a little surly, but he can also be fairly pleasant. We've spent a lot of time together.
What day was that?
What day was that? We've spent a lot of time together at the KCTV5 studios over the years doing political analysis and sparring. And there was that one time we got oysters together on the plaza. And it was, pretty pleasant. So he just kind of, depends what kind of mood he's in. But he was fired up for this debate at the public library last week when he was on the yes side, along with Royals Executive Vice President Sarah Torville. And then you had the no side, our buddy Patrick Toohey from the Show Me Institute, and Becky Nace, who is a former city councilwoman who was on the committee against new Royal Stadium taxes. So I want to play Patrick Toohey versus Sly James here for a second, couple of minutes, wildly entertaining, including, Sly being Sly.
Here's my frustration with this whole issue, is it's on the ballot prematurely. All these things should have been decided before it went to ballot. The teams rushed to get it on the ballot, and they can't answer a lot of questions. And I want to take you at your word, but these things should all be in contracts and enforceable. And one other thing that you mentioned before, if this is voted down, the threat is the teams are going to leave. The teams aren't going anywhere. I've lived in Kansas City long enough to know that if this is defeated, John Sherman will be right back at the table with the county, maybe a little chastened, and he will work on all these things, and we'll be voting on this again in a year. And it may not be a deal that I like next time, but it almost has to be better than what we're looking at today.
Mayor James.
You ever met John Sherman? You ever talked to John Sherman about this? So how the heck do you know what he's going to do if this vote fails?
Because I'll tell you.
At the end of the day, the reason...
Okay, thank you, thank you. Let's hear our panelists. Thank you.
Nick, let's hear our panelists.
At the end of the day, East Village was rejected for 4 reasons. Number one, the highway at that area is a total mess. It would have had to have been rebuilt. Number two, the East Village would have required an entertainment district around it. No reason to do that when you're a half mile away from power and light. Number 3, farther away from transportation hubs like the streetcar. And number 4, it's not just housing, it's low-income housing that's there and a couple of shelters that would have had to have gone, and that was something that he didn't want to do. And while we're talking about John Sherman, let me just say this. John Sherman has put hundreds of kids through college on his own dime. And while everybody wants to vilify him, while everybody wants to talk nonsense...
Thank you.
While everybody wants to talk nonsense, most of the people saying this stuff have never met the man, never had a conversation with him, never had to work with him.
And never been paid by him. But I digress. Anyway, that was Sly James getting a little bent out of shape with Patrick Tuohy, our buddy from the Show Me Institute, on this issue of what the Royals may end up doing. Tuohy says they're not leaving, even if this gets voted down. They may leave Jackson County, but I agree with him in the broader sense that they're not running to Nashville. They're not running anywhere. In fact, there was this story this morning in the Chicago Tribune, headlined, "Could the Chicago White Sox really move to Nashville?" White Sox are having their own issues up there, playing little brother to the Cubs for so long. Says here, if the White Sox ever choose to leave Chicago, moving to Nashville might not come cheap, said Michael Keenan, PricewaterhouseCoopers managing director and sports practice leader. The league will almost certainly demand a relocation fee, which could cost hundreds of millions of dollars or more. That's been one of the issues that we've talked about here. They don't just pick up and move. If there's a relocation fee involved to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, which it will for most markets, that's a part of this that when they threaten is not brought up conveniently.
I'm surprised it's the White Sox leaving. I mean, the Cubs, they play at Wrigley. Talk about concrete cancer, right? The absurdity of it is clearly the White Sox have had a new park since the Cubs.
Yeah.
And the White Sox are like, oh help.
Yeah, they're struggling.
Give me a break.
Yeah, well, you know what?
They got a new stadium.
And they're struggling because, a while back. And I think it was probably the mid-'90s. Yep. But, yeah, certainly newer than Kauffman, right? But they're leaving because they don't get the attention. The team stinks generally. From what I understand, I don't know the area that well. Our buddy Ray Stevens knows the area, I'm sure. He can dive into this more during his show from 10 to noon. But it's a high-crime part of town you don't want to be in. So those are the reasons they might end up and consider moving. Not anything to do with, concrete cancer in the stadium.
New York's got nothing on the cabbies in their little gruffing over Cubs White Sox when you're in a Chicago cab. Jeez, I thought New York was bad with the Mets-Yankees thing. Yeah, everybody's a Cubs fan.
I have not experienced that myself, but I'll take your word for it.
It'll be similar. You'll feel right at home.
Oh, gosh. Looking forward to that at some point. I can't even think about doing anything outside of the day-to-day of a 3-week-old right now. So my mind is not in travel mode. I'll put it that way. 913-4087-95.7. Carl is in Independence. Carl, go ahead. You're on KCMO.
Hi, Pete. Now, I'm not good with dates. I'm not good with names. But I think about 10 to 15 years
So what are you good
ago,
at if you're calling the radio show? Give me something to work with, Carl. Tell me what you're good at, brother. It's like going on a date. You're starting off the date telling me what you suck at. Tell me what you're great at and give me a hot take. Go.
I'm good at remembering the results of studies.
Okay.
And there was a study, I believe it was by Mid-American Regional Council, about 10 to 15 years ago, and it compared the economic impact of sports and the arts. And the sports gets all the parades, but the arts bring in far more money to the economy than do the sports.
And just imagine, Carl, if we had Hunter Biden paintings on display in this town.
I'm trying to eat breakfast. Please don't do that to me.
I didn't say to picture Hunter in his underwear doing lines of coke. I'm just saying, imagine if we had, some Hunter Biden paintings on display. We'd really be cooking in some big-time arts dollars in Kansas City. That'd be something worth thinking about. But, hey, if your mind went in the gutter there, that's on you, buddy. That's on you. 913-408-7957. It is great to be back on a Monday morning on KCMO. 8 days until the big vote. Can you believe it? 8 days for you in Jackson County. And early voting is underway, by the way. So remember that. It's underway. It's happening right now. And I think we're looking at a coin flip at this point in time. 913-408-7957. We got much more coming up after the news, including how some people are going to be offended by the talk of leaving. We'll get to it next.
I'm a fan of both teams, have been my whole life. I take my children, grandchildren, and I am offended that after 50 years, the taxpayers have been good partners. They funded these teams, and that they would respond with, if you don't give us our money, we're leaving. What kind of partnership is that?
Becky Nace, a former Kansas City, Missouri councilwoman, and also on the committee for the Vote No side of the Chiefs-Royals sales tax coming up next week, April 2nd. That was her on the panel that aired on Kansas City PBS over the weekend. And that's something that we've heard from a lot of you. It ties back to why I believe the teams have made a mistake here over the last couple of weeks. They've been surprised. They've been caught off guard by how much blowback they've gotten. They've had to dump another $1 million onto the Vote Yes side. They didn't anticipate this. They thought the Royals spent $300 million on Bobby Witt. The Chiefs win a Super Bowl. They are coasting to victory coming up on April 2. That is unlikely to happen. So now they've taken to threats, which even if you're like me and you can understand voting yes, just to be clear, because I like to say this at least once a show, I'm not advocating for either side. I think there are many pros to voting yes. I think there are many pros to voting no. But I'm more looking at this and analyzing this from a news political perspective and not just doing the rah-rah sports talk guy thing that they've been doing for the better part of 2 months because they don't know any better. There are legitimate reasons on why people would vote no, just like there are legitimate reasons to vote yes. But the teams have, in some cases and in some conversations, resorted to saying, well, if this fails next week, we're going to look at all our options. We'll have to do it. Mark Donovan said as much. We heard from Sarah Torville, the EVP of the Royals, say as much in this panel conversation. And then Becky Nace saying what many of you have said as well, which is the fact that after 50 years, they would just say, well, you know what? It's time. We're going to pick up and go because one vote didn't go their way. First off, I don't buy it. Secondly, that's not the way to do business with someone you claim has been a good partner. So Sly James also referenced that very language, that very phrase of, we'll have to wait and see what happens, but they'll have to explore all their options in this part of the conversation over the weekend.
I'll say exactly what Mark Donovan has said and what John Sherman has said. If the taxpayers say no, then they'll look at all their options. And all of those options are available to them. And if you think, let me just say this, there's been four teams that have moved, I think, in the last 5 or 6 years. Every one of them has moved because of stadiums.
That kind of a threat is not what people want to hear who are on the fence. We are in an environment right now where people want to stick it to the big guy. On the left, that's been the case for a long time. They think if the rich just pay their fair share, throw up your air quotes, their lives somehow improve. It's BS, but that's what they think. On the right, you have people who like Donald Trump, and they view Donald Trump as their guy to stick it to the establishment, to stick it to the elite, to stick it to the media. Both sides of the political aisle have their project, have their guy that they want to use to stick it to the elites of the elites. And for the teams and the people they are using to push their narrative in town to not understand what's happening at the grassroots level is a major mistake. Playing this card is a mistake. Even if they win next week, there will be bad blood in the wake of it.
Well, you have pointed out what might have been more constructive to say, and I certainly agree with you there. I also believe that the answer to that question was inevitable. So I don't know. These people getting all weak-kneed and falling down, they're threatening. Oh, come on. This was inevitable. This is what, if it doesn't pass, then what? In any market, any situation, the answer is the same. Well, then we'll have to look at other options.
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't know that.
It's not unique to the Royals, the Chiefs. I'm having a hard time buying that argument because I saw that as the inevitable answer, whether it got asked or not. Once it got verbalized, everybody's,
Yeah, and that's how we got here today.
Yep.
And that was an answer that, you know what, it's one of those things that you look at and you say to yourself, okay, yes, that is a possibility down the road. Is it a possibility that happens after Tuesday if the no vote comes out on top? No, I don't believe that for a second. They have invested a tremendous amount of time and money and energy on these two locations, Crossroads and Truman Sports Complex, in this market. You're not going to get an announcement on Wednesday saying they're leaving. You're not. That is a fear tactic. Now, it doesn't mean you should vote no. You can still vote yeah, do whatever you want to do, but I'm just saying that thread is empty. Do I think they come back to the table? Absolutely. Do I think they try to make this right? Yes. Do I think if they do this in a way that appeases a lot of the groups that are upset right now, it will pass if they try it again next year? Absolutely. I don't think this is a hard vote to get passed based on the love that this community has for these two teams. If it doesn't pass, it will be because the people in charge screwed it up. It will be because specifically the Royals mismanaged this thing out of the gates. But they can still very much get it done. And I think if they do it in a way that appeases more people, they will get it done. And they'll get it done with flying colors.
The whole thing's an interesting case study, as we've kind of talked about. Some of it is, or very much, a lot of it is how not to do things. If I were teaching a class in high school or current events or in college right now, I'd take this case. And you can walk through it because it's part sports, it's a lot of politics, it's tax, it's the current situation with inflation, all melded into one. It's the ideal people who don't want to give a millionaire any of my money. That kind of thing is very idealistic, and you take that, but that's very much a factor, and especially in these times, as you point out. So it's a great case study right now of this whole picture.
It is, and it's going to be a lot of fun, and I think other markets are watching us here in Kansas City to see what happens next week. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Let's play the rest of this clip, by the way, where there was a baseball historian who was also on the stage last week. This aired on Kansas City PBS, and he brought up another market that is getting some attention, I guess, for a Major League Baseball team. But once again, I'm not buying it. I'm just kind of sharing this with you so you know it's out there.
How often is it? We always hear these threats everywhere around the country. How often does it really happen? And are they mainly idle threats?
Well, it hasn't happened very often in recent years. I think it's a threat that does need to be taken seriously because I understand that Utah just passed a bill and they are going to build a Major League stadium in Salt Lake City, and no doubt they will be lobbying for a Major League Baseball team to transfer.
I'm not worried about Salt Lake City. No, I'm not. I don't think anybody should lose an ounce of sleep over Salt Lake freaking City. Not that it's not up and coming. I know a lot of Californians are moving there, and they're trying to ruin that town just like they ruined Austin, Texas. But I'm not really worried about Salt Lake City. Okay, they're building a stadium. That's nice. But just like we talked about with the White Sox earlier in the hour, the cost for the White Sox to relocate would be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Where is that money coming from? For a team that says they need hundreds of millions of dollars from the taxpayer to do this new stadium build. You're telling me that would make the most economic sense if the no vote comes to fruition next week? I don't buy that. And there's a lot of people who are going to thumb their nose at the team because they have gone down the road of these threats. It's been a major miscalculation. And it's not going to be the reason it goes down, but if it does go down, it could end up being a part of the reason.